So good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Versent Managed Services Cloud Economics webinar. Just a bit of housekeeping before we start. I think we're all very familiar with Zoom and other VC technologies at the moment, but throughout the webinar, we've got a Q&A window available. So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them into that Q&A box, and we'll do our best to answer those throughout the session. But likely we'll come back and talk about those and cover those off at the end. We've also got a chat window available as well. So we've got our Versent marketing team here on standby. So if you're having any technology issues, feel free to drop them into the chat window and our marketing team will respond to those. So after the presentations are finished, we'll provide some information about an offer for both our managed services and our cost and compliance reporting feature. And we'll also provide a follow-up email with some links on some of that content. So welcome. My name is Dean Robinson. I've been at Versent now for 4 years. My role here at Versent is the general manager of our managed services business, and that is mainly managing our customers' AWS environments. We provide 24/7 support for our customers, full stack support, can be application support, continuous improvement activities, and a big part of what we do these days is cost optimization for our customers. Prior to Versent, I was at National Australia Bank and running a lot of their digital assets, so things like nav.com and internet banking, and a lot of their cloud architecture there. So with me today, we've got David Marks, and David Marks is from Boral. He is their cloud infrastructure manager, and he'll be taking us through his cost management journey, which has been in lockstep with the Versent Managed Services team who provide services to Boral, and have done now for a number of years, and also assisted David with his cost management journey. Look, David has got some excellent tips and tricks around cost management. Yeah, I suggest you take many notes because there's some excellent stuff in there. So the webinar is called Cloud Economics. So what is cloud computing? I mean, cloud computing is obviously the on-demand availability of computer systems and resources. And I think, with that comes incredible power and capability that's available to you. And, it's very easy to add additional CPU, additional memory, faster disk, more storage, machine learning, and all these, wonderful technologies available in Amazon. But obviously they come with a cost, and some of them are very heavy costs, and obviously that needs to be managed very closely. So economics focuses on the behavior and interactions of economic agents and how economies work. And this is, part of the sort of introduction before we hand over to David is, I just wanted to take you through some of the things that I've seen, as a part of managing customers' environments and being involved with cloud management for many years. And what are some of those actors and agents that are involved in managing and not only managing but also impacting the cost of your platform. So look, as a part of what we do, as a part of Versent Managed Services, obviously a key part of that is the foundational service management and the 24/7 support. But obviously a big part of what we do these days is around cost management and cost optimization. So look, I love this quote. This is from my economics teacher way back in year 11. He said, "Buy the cheapest car your ego can afford," which is fantastic. I still own a very old Camry, and I've stuck to that mantra for a long time now. So yeah, first and foremost, I'll dig into some of these points in a moment. But I think it's important to understand who and what are the economic agents impacting your cloud run costs. What are the challenges and pitfalls in maintaining and reducing ongoing cloud operating costs? And I think critically balancing flexibility with cost sustainability. You don't want to be a Scrooge. You want to be able to leverage AWS and its capability for what's there, and really sort of drive your business forward, but at the same time maintaining that cost sustainability. And what are the run team doing? I think run teams these days, in particular with cloud, it's a far more complex world to manage, and there's a lot of pitfalls and traps in the run space, and it's very different from your traditional data center management. There's so many things that can catch you out, like CPU credits and burst balance, and it's so much more and so much deeper and richer than just managing the infrastructure. So again, just running through some of the key things that I've seen over the journey, with prospective customers, existing customers, previous life and job. Some of the economic agents that impact your cloud costs. So I think a big one is delivery and business teams, and I think if you you do need to do cost forecasting and maintain a really clear operating expense model and hit your targets throughout the year. It's really important to understand what delivery and project work is happening in your cloud environment. And I'm assuming that most of the people on this call are custodians of some cloud environment. So really critical you get a clear view as to what's happening in your cloud environment and how is that going to impact cost. Testing cycles running longer than planned. People and it kind of goes on to the next point around non-production environment management, but non-production costs can be they can be really exorbitant. Most of the time a production environment is quite refined, but what we find in non-production is that people can tinker a lot more, and therefore do things like cross-region stuff, crazy provisioned IOPS, and some other sort of experimental tools and things like that available, and that can really blow out your costs. Obviously, marketing activities. So if you're in the the customer-facing game where you've got a website or some sort of customer portal, really important to understand when marketing activities and other activities are going to cause your your usage, your cloud usage to increase significantly, and how that will impact cost. I've walked into environments where customers have had amazing auto scaling, but have not had it scale down, and they've got 12 web servers running when they probably only need 2. So really important that yes, auto scaling is great, but are you scaling it back down, and how are you managing that appropriately? I think another important one is the the guardrails and the rules of cloud engagement. I think for those people that are working in your environment and you are the custodian, it's really important to sort of set some guidelines as to what they can and can't do, and what sort of components they can fire up and spin up in your environment, and sort of stay away from some of those more costly items unless you're doing a recharge or something like that. But really important you have some guardrails there. Random bogeys. Look, I see this one a fair bit, and this is around platform instability, which requires greater infrastructure. And like I said, with Amazon, you've got the golden screwdriver. You can just add CPU, you can add memory, you can throw whatever speed disk you want at a problem. And I've seen it so many times where there's been an application deployment or a code change, and it's caused infrastructure performance issues. And it's very easy just to add CPU and make the problem go away. But obviously that comes with elevated run costs. And oftentimes, okay, we've fixed that problem, it's off to the side now, and you sort of forget about it. But you're running 24 cores instead of 4 or something like that on your server, and that kind of hides an underlying root cause of an application issue. And I think the cost that goes into running those extra cores versus spending 20 hours of delivery time to fix an issue, you're far better off fixing root cause and avoiding that ongoing cost. I think we've all been here with the next one, the non-technical teams spinning up POCs, and of course the classic one, the POCs that turn into prod, without any sort of planning or cloud architecture. And someone down in whatever business team have spun up a machine learning device, and then all of a sudden, they start using it for some of their day-to-day business activities, and then the person next to them starts using it. And then all of a sudden you've got a POC that's running in prod that you need to keep alive, that may not be architected properly, and it may be costing you a fortune. So you've got to watch out for those bogeys. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier around the guardrails and the rules of cloud engagement. Pump and dump migrations. When you're bringing infrastructure across from your data center, you will bring it across, with the dimensions of XYZ with CPU, memory, disk. What we find is that when it lands as XYZ over in Amazon, it will actually perform significantly better. And then that sort of goes into right sizing, which I'll talk about in a moment, which is really important after you've done a migration. So non-production machines running 24/7. This is a really interesting one. I think people have a quite a simple concept as to what power scheduling is, and you can just turn stuff off and turn it on. It's not that simple, and it's really important that you have quality automation around that to make sure that when machines are getting turned off at 8 p.m, 9 p.m, and they're starting up again at 7 a.m., that they're starting with the same data set that they ended the day with, that they're starting up correctly, that you're not messing around and wasting testers' time or valuable testing cycles because infrastructure hasn't been provisioned properly. So I think power scheduling is great, and it's really effective for your run costs and reducing your run costs, but it's as much about the automation around it as it is just turning off a machine. And obviously the Versent Managed Services guys can help you with that. So run teams, and look, David will cover off a bit of this in his presentation as well, and he'll probably back over this point at around a consistent tagging strategy. I think tagging is really important. There's so many different tags you can use, and there's so many different ways to slice and dice it. And obviously, our team have got experience in sort of helping our customers work through what the best model is for tagging, but it's quality in and quality out. You get really good tagging strategy, and you get really good data out of it. So I think that's critical. Some of the other stuff as well that can just kind of float around in your environment is unattached volumes and old snapshots and things like that. Storage, all those storage costs, while it seems cheap, some of the slower storage, if you've got lots and lots of snapshots, it can add up really quickly. So important that the run teams are cleaning those up regularly and looking for those. And then right sizing. So I see right sizing as something that it's done ongoing. It's not just something you do once. And then that kind of also goes into some of the auto scaling activities as well, and just making sure that you kind of scale up when you need to, and you've got the right size when you need to. Instance modernization is a big one. Amazon are always releasing new products and new server types, and it's endless the capability they release. You get an email from them probably every couple of days about something new. So really important to stay ahead of the curve on instance modernization and make sure you're on the right machine type at the right time, and then make sure that is right sized, and that will obviously help alleviate any cost challenges. And this is another interesting one around savings plans, and there's so much you can do with Amazon in terms of pre-purchasing environments upfront, and you can save a lot of money doing that, but it is a complex piece to understand, and our guys have obviously got some experience with understanding when is a good time to pre-purchase and at what level. Obviously we can help you with that. So look, our history with Versent Managed Services and helping our customers on this, with some of these things and understanding the agents and their impact. Some of the highlights for us would be a customer up in New South Wales. I think we saved them 800K USD in a single year. With our managed services team and working with their business teams and other teams on a whole range of different optimization things that I've just talked through here. I remember one customer we'd signed up, we only just signed them up. Within, I think, about the first 4 months, we'd saved them ongoing 40K USD a month after we'd started. So not only were we managing their platform 24/7, but we'd almost saved them the cost of the managed services fee within the first few months. So I think all of our team are based here in Australia, and we operate out of Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, and Perth. Given the current times, I think it's important to recognise that Versent is Australian owned and Australian operated with Australian engineers based in those cities I just mentioned. We've obviously got excellent and deep capabilities. So look, I'll conclude there and I'll hand over to David. But yeah, look, thanks very much for listening, and I'll now hand over to David to start his presentation on his journey at Boral, and he's also got some incredible tips and tricks, like I said, that I think you'll find very, very interesting. And so once we've finished the Boral presentation, we'll come back for a bit of Q&A, and then we'll take you through the offer that we've got there at the end. So I'll hand over to you, David.
Thanks very much, Dean. It's great to be here today. And I really appreciate all the advice and support provided by Versent. Versent have really helped us on our journey. And basically Versent told us all the basics, and we pick up the ball, and we've been really eager to save costs. And through our determination, we've been very successful. So today I'm going to share with the audience what they didn't put in the brochure. I'm going to share our most successful ideas that really prove that lots of little actions can lead to massive savings. So A little bit about me. Obviously, I love finding new ways to save costs. Something you might not know about me is I got married in Turkey 18 months ago. And the photo that you can see there shows what happens when a customer who doesn't speak much Turkish goes to a hairdresser who doesn't speak any English. So be careful if you go to Turkey. A little bit about Boral. So Boral is Australia's largest construction materials and building product supplier. We have concrete, quarries, asphalt, cement, roof tiles, timber, masonry, gyprock. There's probably some other things that we have as well. On average, every day of the year, we deliver 8,000 cubic metres of concrete. That's every day. Today, we delivered 20,000 cubic metres of concrete. So it's a big operation, and we need to make sure we're effective in the solutions that we have. So why should you listen? Well, if you haven't fallen asleep yet, obviously you're a little bit interested. Why you should listen is I'm going to give you real examples and real results. I'm going to give you 13 simple tips that will help you save lots of money. Now, some people think number 13 is unlucky, but if you follow these tips, you're going to be lucky. And of course, Versent has a special offer at the end. So let's get into the tips. So the biggest tip, and Dean alluded to it earlier, is to enforce a tagging standard. We did this from a fairly early stage of the journey, and all the automation that you will consider will be dependent on a solid tagging strategy. You'll be able to make informed decisions when you know what your environment looks like. You can easily make decisions that make sense. When you know what your environment looks like, you're not going to have a lot of rework to do. You'll have a clear picture of your fleet. Now, AWS has a hard limit of 50 tags for any resource, and we're using probably about 42, and I've provided an example there. You feel free to screenshot that. That's just an example that may or may not suit your business. That's what works for Boral. I think it's also very important to keep checking that the data in your tags is accurate and up to date. You're going to struggle to do it by yourself, so set up automation where you can to update tag values and identify champions within your organization to help you maintain those tags. Tip number 2 is to follow a trusted sequence. This is important because it's going to help you maximize cost savings. Terminating an instance or resource generates the biggest saving. If you don't need something, get rid of it. The cost is then gone forever. I then recommend consider auto shutdown. This has a big saving on compute costs, but not on storage. It's fairly simple to implement, and people should know whether they need a resource and if they need a resource, when they need it. Reconfiguration and right sizing often requires a lot of analysis and takes more time to implement. So that's why I put that further down the list. Once you've followed those first 3 steps, that's the time to consider either reserved instances or savings plans. If you enter into those ideas too early, then you might actually reduce the benefit or eliminate the benefit and cost you more than on-demand costs. Reserved instances and savings plans, as Dean alluded to, have some complications, and if you pick the wrong thing, it could be detrimental. It is best applied to resources that are going to run 24/7, and that's the other reason to leave those to last. And effectively, it's a reward just for committing to a minimum period. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. Tip number 3 is to address spikes very quickly. The chart I've shown here shows that very early in our journey, one team in Boral tried something a little bit funky, and it caused a bit of a funky cost report. So it's important to check frequently. Now, the team that caused this cost spike were not aware of it. So fortunately, I was able to talk to them on the following day. They realised, they were very apologetic. And what they did, they started to use Stacks, a tool that Versent provided us, to check after they make changes what's going on. In that way, you empower the teams to become self-sufficient, but don't rely on the teams. I also recommend, if you're responsible for a cloud environment, to do your own checking on a regular basis. Now imagine if I hadn't checked or the team hadn't checked, that little spike, if I waited to the monthly invoice, could have cost us 30,000 US more than we expected to pay. So that's why it's important to check regularly. Okay, tip number 4, empty your sandpit regularly. And Dean alluded to this earlier. You know, people create resources and forget to delete them. And, you know, there's an important statistic I'll refer to now. 87.2% of all kids don't pick up their toys when they're finished playing. Now, if you have kids or know someone who has kids, you know this is true. So creating a script to clean out a sandpit regularly is a great way to do it. And there's a bit of a code snippet there on the left-hand side of the slide. And one of our team put that together. It runs every Monday and terminates any resources in sandpit that are older than 30 days. The people that use the AWS environment at Boral know that that's the case, and if they forget to do their own cleanup, we clean up for them. Yeah, this could be saving 10 or 20,000 US per year for people that forget to terminate resources. Moving on to tip number 5, and that is to review RDS connections. So the relational database service from AWS is a great service, and a lot of people will provision a database and they're not quite sure how much they're using it. Again, I got my team to create a script that goes in and analyzes each RDS instance and reports back to me the number of connections per instance per hour. What you can see on the slide there is 2 specific databases that were running 24/7. All those red zeros you see are where the database was running and we were getting charged, but there were no connections. I use this chart to present to the business to say, hey, instead of running 24/7, why don't we run it 12/5? And I boxed up the areas that I thought would work. So after they accepted that and we implemented each week, these RDS instances were running 60 hours per week rather than 168 hours per week. By making that change for each of those 2 RDS instances, the cost went from $1,600 per month to $600 per month.
Hey David, it's sorry to jump in, mate. It's Dean here.
Sure.
I think the video has frozen for you, and so have the slides. So perhaps what we might do is just pause for 30 seconds, and if you could stop sharing and then start sharing again, and we'll just check because all this valuable content is still stuck on slide 2. So let's just bear with us a second, folks. Right. Okay, great. So yep. So we can now see review RDS connections. Yep.
Yep. Did anyone need the previous slides, Dean? Did you get any feedback on that?
Oh yeah. So I think it's stuck on 2. So maybe just really quickly, just whiz through maybe 3 and 4, and we can just cover that off, and then we'll go back to 5. Yeah, if that's okay. If you could just back over that one quickly for the folks, because there's a few questions coming through.
So I'll just leave that for a second or 2 in case anyone wanted to screenshot it. So address spikes quickly. Again, if anyone wanted to screenshot that, empty your sandpit regularly. And the one that I was most recently talking about, review RDS connections. So as I was saying, this saved Boral $2,000 a month for those two RDS instances that I have displayed there, which was a 64% reduction in RDS instance costs for those instances. And can you imagine if you applied that to multiple RDS instances, the cost just become incremental. With those same two RDS databases, they were used in a single business unit. And when we saw that the connections weren't that high, we recommended to them to put two databases on a single RDS instance. They agreed to that. We performed that. And so that then reduced the cost by 50% of what it was at that point in time. And if you can do that for multiple databases across your fleet, it's just more and more opportunity for cost savings. Tip number 7 is to apply RDS power scheduling. So those previous two slides talked about how to get to an evaluation about the power scheduling. Some teams might already know how much power scheduling they need, when they don't. The little table there on the sheet shows at a snapshot in time of how many instances, RDS instances we had on different power schedules. So at the beginning of March, we hadn't implemented it. By mid-March, we started to move instances across to power scheduling. Now, we saved 20% in costs. With a similar fleet, you could save up to $90,000 US per year by applying the power scheduling and combining databases. So with a fairly simple bit of code and a little bit of discussion with your stakeholders, there are lots of savings to be made. Moving on to tip number 8, remove provision IOPS. Now this one is a real big saving. Now what they don't tell you in the brochure is that when you use migration tools, they look at the source system and make some guesses about the amount of provision IOPS and other resource allocations that you need. When we received assistance to migrate a whole hundreds of instances, basically, the costs were high. And when we started to analyze, we found that provision IOPS was very expensive. I got one of my team to write a script that showed us, firstly, the amount of provision IOPS that were allocated, and also the amount of provision IOPS that we were actually consuming. It turns out that we were rarely consuming the amount of provision IOPS that were configured. And we were able to completely eliminate provision IOPS from our configurations. What you can see there is the purple area on the chart is provision IOPS. And as that's removed, the cost goes down, but the performance didn't. We're able to do that in a bulk lot for non-production instances. That's that first step that you see. And then we did that more slowly in December for production, where people wanted to be more confident and we would test a bit. And obviously, provision IOPS is a bit like the Ferrari going to the milk bar. We didn't need it. Now, with a similar environment, removing provision IOPS could save up to $330,000 US per annum. That's a lot. And that is a very good tip if you are using any migration tools to migrate to AWS. The next slide I want to talk to you about is be creative with comms. When it comes to EC2, it's a bit more difficult to, it's not like RDS where you can say the number of connections to say whether someone's using something or not. You can look at graphs about CPU usage, memory usage, disk reads, etc. But it's not as concrete. And convincing a lot of stakeholders was difficult. And you know, you've all heard the arguments, and I'm sure there's some people on the call today who still use them. You know, some guys, don't shut it down, it might come back up. It might not come back up. We're definitely going to use it this weekend. My manager said it must be up 24/7. People use these excuses, and it's hard to get them to change their perspective. They're used to a period of time where in a traditional data center, they didn't have much control, where the reliability of equipment might not have been as high as it is today. And convincing people was just difficult. One night before a management meeting, I was racking my brain, how am I going to get these people to change their mind? So I come up with this simple chart that you see on this slide. Just very simple, just shows how much you can save by adopting different power schedules. And words hadn't worked, discussions hadn't worked, emails hadn't worked, but this picture finally clicked with a whole bunch of people. And it got some of my colleagues excited about cost saving. So take a snapshot of this and feel free to use it, and it will definitely help. The next idea, tip number 10, is to create competition. And this idea came out of an AWS cost optimization immersion day that I attended. It's a very simple idea. Broadcast an email to a lot of people with a table showing who was the best, then sit back and watch people try and get to the top. After I started sending this series of emails, people kept calling me, David, how can I get to the top? You know, why, you know, I shut down all these systems. How come I'm not further up? It just created a lot of competition. And by doing that over a period of time, the adoption of auto shutdown increased, and it increased significantly. So I highly recommend that as an approach to get people to change. Tip number 11 is to set auto tagging for new instances. This is a simple script that we use to set some default values, because when people first power up or build instances, they may not use them regularly. They might still be just getting ready for something that's going to happen in a couple of weeks. And by applying some tag values that will be more cost effective, makes it easy for you to manage. So we turn off backups until the team is ready to really use it. We turn off scheduling, so it's off the bulk of the time, so they just have to turn it on manually when they need it. We also have a resource created by and resource creation date tag that is auto-populated. So if we want to contact someone, it's easy to do it by just looking in the tags. It makes all our support teams easy for them to do their job. In the future, it's my plan to use those tags to automatically terminate instances where tag values aren't updated or the resource is unused after a certain period of time, similar to what we do with the sandpit. So this is a chart of the success of EC2 shutdown. On the 11th of August, when I took a snapshot, we had 558 EC2 instances. If all those instances were running 24/7, we would consume 93,000 hours of compute time each week. 93,000. By applying auto shutdown across our fleet, we are saving 43,000 compute hours per week. That's 43,000 hours of compute time we don't have to pay for. With a similar fleet to ours with 500, 600 servers, you could easily save $400,000 US per year simply by shutting down. Again, a highly recommended tip. Savings plans, tip number 13. Once you have all your right sizing done, once you've terminated instances, once you know which instances are going to run 24/7 and which ones are going to run for shorter periods of time, that's the time to consider reserved instances and savings plan. And basically, AWS give you a discount for committing to a period of time, and that minimum is 12 months, but it can be 2 years or 3 years. It can vary depending on the amount of discount varies depending on the commitment term, the instance types you have, the OS types, and a number of other factors. And it works best if you are running those instances 24/7. You can actually get into, if you commit to a plan and then start right sizing, and what the instance types you right size to aren't covered by the plan, then you could be paying for a resource twice, once under the reserved instance and once on demand. If you do that enough times, then you could be paying more than what you would have with on demand only. So let's say you had 250 EC2 instances on a savings plan, you could easily save 75,000 US per year. And for us, that was a 16% reduction in eligible costs. The great news about all the cost-saving tips that I've recommended to you today is that in our case, we've saved $1 million US per year. And that is just by checking regularly, by encrypting sandpit, by adopting savings plan, by removing provision IOPS, and by configuring auto shutdown for RDS and EC2. $1 million. If you can do that using these 13 tips, then you are lucky. So here's a summary of what we covered today. Enforce a tagging standard. Follow a trusted sequence. Address those cost spikes quickly. Empty your sandpit regularly. Review your RDS connections. That's going to help you apply the power scheduling in tip 7. Combine multiple databases onto a single RDS instance. Remove provision IOPS. Remember that they could be configured automatically from migration tools. Be creative with your comms and create competition to encourage people to adopt EC2 auto shutdown. Set auto tagging for new instances and apply EC2 power scheduling. And then commit to a savings plan. With all these tips, I'm sure you'll be able to save money. Thank you, Dean, and I'll hand back to you.
No worries, David. Look, thanks very much for that. That was an excellent presentation, and really appreciate your insights there and all that you've learned and your experiences. Very, very valuable, and really great to see how much money you've saved Boral. And I love some of the gamification stuff that you've done there as well. I think that's an excellent idea, and it certainly keeps people interested. So I think what we'll do now is we'll just jump into a bit of Q&A. We've had a couple of questions come through. So I think someone from our marketing team is going to jump on and ask us some of these questions. I think I'm just going to find the Q&A panel.
Cool thing. Can you all hear me clearly?
Yes.
Yep.
Great. Thanks,
Joan.
Thanks again, Dean and David, for that wonderful presentation. Very informative and a lot of depth and definitely learnings from for the audience. We do have several questions from the audience. First one is for Dean or David. You mentioned right sizing. How do we approach right sizing of EC2?
I'll take that if you like. Basically with EC2, just get a report that's available through AWS, through Stacks, through other tools that you might have, through the AWS console. Just look at what resources an instance is consuming. And if it's consuming less than 50% of the resources, it's probably a candidate for right sizing. And when you right size, when you drop down a single instance type, you can save probably 50% of the resource costs for that instance.
Great. Thanks for that answer, David. Another question here is, which RDS would you use? Oracle, SQL Server, or MySQL?
I think you have to use whichever. RDS is a service, and you can use any of those database engines in that service. And it depends what the application requires. And obviously, some of the database types are more cost effective. But again, it's up to what the application can handle, and that would really be part of the development team's design.
Yeah, that's right. And I think too, over the journey, we've seen a few people bring their databases across on EC2 just to sort of get started, and then transition over to RDS. But cost aside, RDS has some excellent capabilities and performance insights, and can really help you tune your database. And we've just done that extensively with an existing customer using some of the performance insights available through RDS for an Oracle instance. So yeah, RDS is a great product for your database.
Thanks, Dean and David. Another question. What was the strategy used for combining databases?
Just look at what databases you're using, and if it's within a similar solution or product team, it's probably going to be obvious. We had one team in our supply chain area that for a particular application had 4 or 5 separate instances, and we talked to them about combining them onto a single instance, which significantly reduced costs. It just meant when we had to restart or do anything for one, it impacted the others. But in a non-production environment, that was a very small cost to pay compared to the benefit of the cost saving that we received.
Great, thanks for that, David. Next question, are any of the scripts mentioned in the public domain?
Oh. You got a public GitHub or something going, David? With all your tools?
I don't know. I've got really clever people that do that for me. What I'll do is I'll ask them, and and if they're online, they might even put it into the Q&A. But if they don't, I'll come back to you, Dean or Joan, and let you know.
Yeah, and look, just to cover that off in a bit more detail, look, we find that there are so many different ways that you could do certain, things around automation with scripting, and a lot of the AWS foundations, across our customer base and just across, AWS in general, can range in technology. So obviously it can be a bit of a horses for courses type thing, with some sort of generic components, but ultimately it needs to fit in with your environment, of course.
A couple more questions and then we can wrap it up. But this one is for David Marks. With the auto cleanup in the sandbox, have you ever lost any in-flight work, and what was the impact?
I'm not sure if we did, but I've been very clear to all the stakeholders that it disappears after 30 days. And if you start worrying about if people are going to lose stuff, they only have to lose it once to then comply. When you're dealing with a very big environment, sometimes you might have to be a little bit harder and stricter. Otherwise, you're just going to continue to consume costs when it's not necessary.
That's a great answer, David. Thank you. For David or Dean, any tips on how to get started on managing costs down?
Well, I think that there's a couple of ways. I mean, there's obviously some native tools available by AWS with, Compute Optimizer, and then there's of course our own internal Versent Stacks, tooling for wastage, which we've got a link for at the end, which is great for finding wastage and working out where to get costs down. I think, right sizing is obviously a big one. Power scheduling is another one, but David talked about it extensively, and that's another one around storage performance and provisioned IOPS, and also cross-region stuff as well. There's some big gains to be made there by looking at some of those.
Even if you don't have a huge environment and you don't have the scripting in place, just talking to colleagues and saying, hey, do you use that? Just turn it off manually. Just turn it on manually when you need it. Step one. And if enough people do that, you start saving costs.
Yep.
Great, thanks. Question for David. How big is the Boral team and who manages this infrastructure?
So Boral manages the infrastructure. I have a team of 7 that are responsible for the core of the infrastructure. We also used Versent Managed Services, who provide 24/7 monitoring and alerting, and also help us with improving the environment so it becomes more automated. And in addition to that, we also try and educate the product teams around Boral, and there's about 12 product teams, educate them so they can do their own patching, so they can look at costs and sort of turn things off more frequently. We encourage them to update tags, and that helps on the cost journey as well.
Great, thanks for that, David. Another question, is Trusted Advisor helpful in right sizing?
Dean, I don't use Trusted Advisor for cost optimization that frequently.
No.
There's probably some things in there.
Yeah, probably not your go-to. I think, like I say, I think the Compute Optimizer and some of those other, you know, Cost Explorer components, plus any other auxiliary third-party tools that you're using. But yeah, I think probably start with those before Trusted Advisor. You probably wouldn't get a whole heap out of that. I wouldn't imagine.
But Trusted Advisor has a lot of great things in there, so I encourage you to go use it and have a look. But it's not something I use as a first point of call for cost optimization questions.
Yep.
Now, there's another question here. I'm not sure if it's a question or a statement, but with database consolidation, this was likely done by using the RDS same physical host name, but using a different logical DB name. Example, Postgres/Oracle/MySQL support this. So I think that may be a response to a previous question, potentially, David?
It sounds like, and maybe if anyone from the Boral team's on there who was involved, they could just type an answer in there. I'm not clear. I know multiple databases can easily coexist on an RDS instance. The databases can be addressed irrespective of the RDS instance. So the RDS is more like a container, like a service. Yeah, but you can definitely have multiple databases within an instance. And Fard is one of the guys that's written half these scripts I've published here, and he said, yes, logical.
Yeah. Definitely logical. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Fard.
No worries. We'll wrap up the questions. There are a few people that have missed a couple of the tips. So post the webinar session, we will send through the presentation slides to everybody that attended. And over to you, Dean.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that, Joan. Thanks for all the questions, folks. That was really, really good. Some great conversation there at the end. And yeah, happy to answer any further questions at a later stage. So look, we've basically got an offer here that we talked about at the start. And as a part of our managed services group, we're offering 4 hours of cost consulting. So we'll obviously talk to you and your technical teams and understand your environment, your AWS environment. And you know, do a bit of an over the phone /VC type assessment with any data that you've got, and provide some tips and tricks on how to get your costs down. We've also got our Stacks cost and compliance feature, which is available, which is an excellent product for reducing and determining wastage in your environment and tracking costs. And there's a link there for that particular tool. And that's used extensively by our customer base and people that even aren't our customers. So excellent product there.
I use Stacks every day. Just for that, just let people know. I use Stacks every day for cost and for compliance. It's a great tool. Yeah, excellent tool. Very, very good tool. And yeah, one the managed services team at Versent here use extensively as well. So I think we'll wrap up there. And yeah, so I think we'll probably send some comms out via email, and feel free to follow up with myself directly. And I think, look, we'll probably call time on it there. But look, thanks very much for listening, David. Great insights, and Joan and to the Versent marketing team. Thanks so much for pulling all this together. Really appreciate everyone listening, and you know, hope you have a pleasant rest of your Thursday afternoon. So thank you very much.
Great. Thanks everybody. Thanks, David. Thanks, Dean.
Thanks, guys.
For all our attendees, stay tuned over LinkedIn and the Versent website for any other future webinars that we will be hosting and running. So thanks again and enjoy your Thursday.
Thanks, folks. See ya.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye.